The sponsors for all of today's classes is a dedication in memory of the father and grandfather Rolf Pierre Kartz from the Pierre Kartz family, and Abraham Moshe ben Yaakov Mordechai alav shalom. 14th of Tammuz is today. That's his Yortzeit. He was born in Germany, arrived in the United States at the age of 8, and he served on the highest levels of the government. And together with their mother, they instilled the children the Jewish identity and a love of Israel. And therefore, we are dedicating for the Aliyah of the Neshama of Abba Moshe ben Yaakov Mordechai. Now, some of you have kept last week's source sheets. If you have not, I will give them out here, okay? I'm going to give this. You have yours or no? You have it? Good. So there's, okay. Malki, you want one? All right, good. I told you that this lecture, this approach, this shiur is not going to be a one-time shiur, which is why we barely got finished with the first third of it just last week. And just to review and refresh your memories as to what we were talking about, in discussing why the punishment was such as it was, I would put this for Moshe, because he hit a rock instead of talking to the rock, which is the basic approach, and which, as we went through the specific, shall we say, program that God had told Moshe, I want you to do this and this and this. There were 5 things he was told to do to bring them water. He did 4 out of the 5. And but the third one, which is to talk to the rock, and he hit the rock, so that was what's wrong. That's why most people say that seems to be the problem. But either way, it was problematic because it just doesn't seem to be, as both Gilbert and Sullivan would say, a punishment that would fit the crime. It would, not too many people will see that, you know. Punishment fits the crime. Anyway, so it's Mikado. So therefore, many of the Meforshim and Parshanim look and search for another reason, or some other thing that may have caused God to be upset. In fact, as I pointed out later on in Va'et Hanan, when Moshe says, okay, I made a mistake, but help me out. Let me go into the land after he had been punished not to do so. And God doesn't simply say, no, I'm sorry. He says, that Moshe tells the story saying that God got very angry. Didn't say Vayechas, it's Vayechar Apo. Vayet is not found often. You have Evra, meaning very anger, tremendous anger. Vayit Aber, Rashi and others say that he filled himself with anger like an Isha Ubara, like a pregnant woman. That's how it was, just filled with anger. And he told Moshe, no, that little hitting rock just doesn't fulfill this, or at least satisfy us. For a reason for Moshe to be so upset, for God to be so upset with Moshe. And while going through that statement we have in Va'et Hanan, we found a crucial word which sort of made us, and that was that God claimed to Moshe, that Moshe claimed in telling the people what happened, that he was refused that request to go into the land, even asking please to God a second time. He says, so God got very angry at me, lima'anchem. And Rashi says right there, because of you, biglalchem, because of your fault that happened. Very difficult thing to imagine that we saw what happened. It says God got angry at Moshe, And Moshe said, yeah, it wasn't me, it was your guys. That's not a Moshe thing to do. To blame others for a mistake that he himself made. And therefore we began to search. And the verse that Rashi brings down, I did this toward the end of the class, comes from Tehillim to prove his point. And there in Tehillim, it doesn't say that lema'anchem, it doesn't say that Rashi says it means biglalchem, atem gramtem, you caused it, which is what he says. But the pasuk in Tehillim says, vayaktifu al mei meriva, that they're angry at mei meriva, and vayera Moshe, and things went bad for Moshe, ba'avuram. Now, ba'avuram does not mean as Rashi says, gramtem, that you caused it to happen. Lemanechem, as a better explanation, actually a very clear, is for your sake. God got angry with me, not because of you, but for your own sake. Yes, I made the mistake, and I had to be punished because that would be better for you. That approach is a fascinating one and a very important one. So I began by telling you, let's see what are the possibilities that A, make God so angry at Moshe, and B, why was it considered not as Rashi says, because it was the fault of Bnei Yisrael, but rather, as the Tehillim indicates, that it was ba'avurchem, for the benefit of Israel. So it's actually in Tehillim. I think I have that down here. I'm sorry, I just wherever it says Tehillim, I may not. It was just a short one, so I may not have included it. Yeah, no, I didn't include it but Rashi uses it anyway. The quotation of that Rashi has, I think I do have that quotation, where he says ba'avurchem. Come on. Well, maybe not. But Rashi says that, and he quotes that Tehillim. So, at any rate, if you really want to know specifically, I can tell you exactly where it is. Okay, but anyway, we went through the different approaches, the approaches of Ibn Ezra, of the Rambam, and the Ramban, and then I brought to you what I felt was a very, very fascinating approach, that of the Rashbam. The Rashbam was actually the grandson of Rashi. Grandson of Rashi, he was about 20 years old, and Rashi was, after Rashi passed away in the year of 1105. He was born in 1040, he died in 1105. The Rashbam was born in 1085, about 20 years before Rashi died. He had a brother by the name of Rabeinu Tam. Rabeinu Tam was born in about the year 1100. He was about 5 years old, and his grandfather died. And if you know, those who've learned Gemara, I know Rabeinu Tam was probably the greatest genius of the Tosafot. And they disagree about different things. But at any rate, the Rashbam's approach was always one of pashtut. He always looks for the most direct understanding of what the simple text says. And he brings the source that we found here. I want to see exactly what it is. Okay. That it's based upon lahakdishem. The text tells us that when God says that you're being punished and you will not be able to lead the people into the land, which we generally means that he weren't allowed to go into the land, although I pointed out that at that point, it doesn't seem that he says you can't go in, but other than that you can't lead it. But later on, it seems clear that it will happen. Anyway, that that we find that at the text there in the 20th parak of Bamidbar, in fact, that we have it in our first source, that it says in the second to the last verse, the 12th verse there in source number 1, Vayomer Hashem el Moshe el Aharon, that Moshe, that God tells both Moshe and Aharon, Ya'an lo he'emantem bi, because you failed to. I'll give the usual explanation, which I think is the incorrect one, the translation. You failed to have enough faith in me, lehakdisheni, to bring to sanctify my name, to sanctify me in the le'enei b'nei Yisrael, in the eyes of the people. Therefore, lachein lo taviyu et hakal hazeh el haaretz. You will not bring these people into the land that I'm giving them. That's it. And this pasuk also opens question, because it's telling that what Moshe did and what Aharon did failed to sanctify God. And that too is a question. The clear and assumption is, for those who take this simple approach, that, well, he shouldn't have hit because when you were in the first year and the first time when it happened, and God and Moshe hit the rock as he was told to, and the water came out, that was the first generation. Now it's 40 years later, 39 years later. And when this happens, God purposely told them, don't hit the rock. Why do you think there's any sanctification, one way or the other? It's a miracle. I hit a rock and water comes out. I talk to a rock and water comes out. What is the big difference? So I think you could figure this one out. What impact would it happen to people when they hits the water and comes out, or he simply says, water come out, and the water comes out? That second one is a lot more powerful. So those who take this, and that's why perhaps it's the most popular approach, that the sin was that he hit it, because had he spoken to it, it would have been a greater miracle, and the people of Israel would have been even sanctified. They would have sanctified God's name even more in realizing what an amazing thing happened. That is why God got angry, and so on and so forth. But again, as we pointed out, it's difficult to think and I say it as a minor difference, they would have taken such a rather radical punishment. And as I pointed out again, remember what Moshe had done over for 40 years, what he did for them. He hit and you know what? I would understand why Moshe did what he did. Yeah, maybe he didn't hear God well, didn't listen well. But why would God have told him, I'm Moshe, and I'm Moshe. But if Moshe hears from God, Kach et hamateh, take the staff and go to the rock. What is he going to think? He's going to sing a lullaby to the staff. Why would God want him to take the staff? Obviously, like he did not 39 years ago, watch him hit the rock. It's only logical. If God didn't want him to hit the rock, why does he say take the staff? That would have been the logical thing. So I try to understand, and trying to understand that it was Moshe. It was not that far off. It's understandable why he would do that. And given the fact that you can understand why he would get confused about that, why would God, after all, want me to bring a stick if he doesn't want me to use the stick to hit the... So why would he get such a terrible punishment? And then beyond that, it would have been better if he spoke to it. I mean, someone to say, you didn't you didn't sanctify God by hitting a rock, that's a pretty good thing to do. Yeah, you got the water came out. I think it was the Ramban who says, one of the things, he said, the lack of sanctifying Israel is that because he did him twice. If he did it the first time, but he did it twice, it's as if God couldn't pick it up the first time. Kenzain, it could be. Either way, there are problems still in the entire approach, and that's what we did. So that's where we get to both the Chizkuni and the Rashbam. These are not in sources either. Both of them said that our big misunderstanding is based upon Hamateh, the staff. And as I pointed out to you, almost always, whenever God wanted Moshe to use the staff, he would say, "Kach et matecha," or "Kach et hamateh asher hikita bo et hayaor." Take the mateh, the staff that you hit the river with. He was very specific. I don't know, and I was in the middle of looking it up, but I did finish. I don't know if he ever refers to Moshe's staff as hamateh and not matecha. I think maybe at Amalek, but I'm not sure. But here it says, don't kachet matecha, which would make sense. It says kachet hamateh, the staff. And I pointed out to you, I think I did, but if I didn't, now I'm going to do it. And if I did, so I'm going to do it again. Because this is an essential opening to a whole different approach to what most people have in this sin, and I think a much more satisfying. Moshe's sin was not hitting once or twice, but rather the fact that he ignored a direction given by God sometime before about how to handle people who rebel against him and God. Moshe saw the people as being rebels, which, by the way, one could argue they were not. If you have no water for your children, it's just a matter that the dishwasher won't work. I mean, we're talking about life and death. It's understandable that you go to your leader and says, well, what's happening here? So, Moshe clearly a little upset, maybe needlessly so. He not only got angry with them, he got angry with them by calling them, Shimuna, listen to me, Hamorim, you rebels. That's a strong thing to say. Huh? Morah, yeah. Morah, right. I told you, don't confuse that with teachers. But anyway, and the Rashbam and the Chizkun, they say, because Hamateh, he wasn't supposed to take his staff, which he did.
I thought he took the staff of Aaron.
No, that's what I said, that he should have done. Back in TORAH, Parshat TORAH, when even after the whole punishment of Korach and his cohorts, and Datan and Aviram and his followers, that Korach and his cohorts who tried to be Kohanim, and they tried to offer up the Torah, which is the holiest of all things one that a Kohen could do. And they claimed, Moshe said only one person could do that. And they said, well, we're all doing it. 250 of them thought they're going to be the Kohen Gadol. And as soon as they do that, they were all burned in fire, gone. And the Datan and Aviram, went to check exactly where the Iranians were hiding the uranium. But they were swallowed in the land, in the earth. After that, one would have imagined that Bnei Israel would have been pretty impressed. Oh, okay, just kidding. We didn't join them. We're okay. But there was a group of people who said, these are wonderful people. Atem hamitemed am Hashem. You have murdered God's people. That's what they were telling Moshe and Aaron. Did you see what happened? Did you know what Moshe said? No. You're the leader, and as happens throughout history, it's your fault. You shouldn't have killed them. And you killed them, and they're a holy people. After all, they wanted to be Kohanim, weren't so terrible, they were. And, God had it up to here. He didn't have it here, but he obviously takes very upset. And he starts a Magifah, there's a plague, and people. In the end, he says, this is how you're going to stop it. He said, I have to prove to the people that what I say and what you say are the same thing. That you do and follow what I say. So what we're going to do, since there were people who claimed they should be a Kohen, they should do all these things, they should be the leaders, let's tag every head, the head of each tribe would take their staff. The staff was really one that was like a flag of each tribe. In fact, Gemara speaks about each flag. Or look, if you ever see some of the artwork that people have, often each of the tribes have a color or have some sort of a thing. It's based upon what the Gemara says, and I think it's in Zohar also, of what it looks like. So each of them had a flag that was held up, so that when people, after they went to the restaurant and they had to go home at night, they say, "Where's my tribe?" And they see a flag going up. There we are. And they recognize we're there. They are camping. That's what it is. Anyway, they had to take these staffs, and he said, bring them to the holiest place we have here in the desert, which is the Aron Kodesh. Therefore, what's in the Aron, by the way? You are aware that the Aron is what?
The tablet.
Right, exactly. Shnei Luchot, Tablets, 10 Commandments are there. Can't get much better than that. And place the staffs overnight by the holy ark, and in the morning go and see if any, or actually which one of the staffs began to blossom. It wasn't just a clearly cut and some piece of stick. It was a branch. See which branch of this begins to put forth blossoms and so on and so forth. They do that. Next morning, of course, which one? Aharon's was the only staff that blossomed, and they all saw that. They also, nobody went and started planting it overnight. They came and they saw them, and they took it out of the next to the Aron, the Moed. So they went and saw what it was and said, "This will prove to them that you are the chosen, that our God has chosen you." That's why he made a miracle on that staff. And then he goes, said, and keep this staff here, Mary. So it will be a sign to anyone who dares to rebel that I've touched you to do these things. And so you see that, and they'll remember that is. Along comes years later, or maybe months later, because this happens in TORAH. We don't know exactly what time that happened between year 2 to year 40. There's a difference in. So along comes this complaints that they have no water, and Moshe gets angry, and Moshe calls them, "You rebels." What does God tell him to do? God had told him, take the staff that I told you would be the signs for any rebels that I have done this, and this will stop. And it says it was their complaints will stop. That's all. What does he do? Moshe doesn't listen to that. Whether he forgot or whatever, in his anger, which is also a problem, he takes the wrong staff. This is what the Rashbam says. He took his own staff instead of Aaron's. And that's why it doesn't work. That's why the water didn't come out at first. He had to hit it twice. So Moshe, And God said, I don't want Moshe to get too embarrassed here. I have to have that, so he let it come out. One would argue, perhaps, that because they took the wrong staff, that's why the miracle isn't going to work the way God wanted it to work. And that, therefore, was the sin. And that, I think, is a very, very, and the statement, therefore, of God says, you failed lahakdisheni, to sanctify me, may not have anything to do with hitting or talking or anything, but rather because you didn't do what I told them would do, take the right staff, put the staff there, and that would be exactly what I told them would happen, and that would sanctify me. And by not doing that, that was a sin. That was a sin. As I said, you won't find many people saying it. It is the approach of both the Chizkuni and the Rashbam. I think it's a powerful one, and it's really something that is far more satisfying in my simple belief that in giving the reasons why. And there may have been more than one reason. But that's just a wonderful starting, or at least to really complete the picture. There's something else that happens here. When God first tells them, Lo taviyah ta'am hazeh, you're not going to bring them, it would seem to imply that there is a lack in the leadership. Your sin was not a sin of a human, of a regular, one of the guys, you know. It was a lack of leadership. That lack of leadership wasn't simply that you took the wrong stick. The lack of leadership, I would imagine, is your anger and your immediate response to the problem. As I pointed out in the very beginning, the lack of water for a nation in a desert. Now, they stopped off in different places. By the way, these different places weren't all rock and sand. They were basically oases, but there was always water for them, whether it was Be'er Miriam was always there with them. But the fact that they no longer have water, and as Malki will tell us all, that's because who just died? Miriam. And Miriam not only had the name, had Mayim in her name, just take the race off, and you have Mem, you had Mem, but the race in there is Miriam. Anyway, that was the gift, of course, the saintly Miriam Nivi'ah. That was because of her, God had granted Israel the water that would be with them at all times, and she died, and therefore, impacting to the people how important that death was, what it meant. At any rate, it's understandable they're going to get upset. And as a good leader, you can handle that differently. We pointed it out the times before. In the few parshas before, in the earlier years, admittedly, you have the stories of the Kivrot HaTa'ava where Moshe said, I can't do it anymore. And it doesn't yell and scream because they're all rebels. He said, it's too heavy of a burden for one person to do. And that, he goes to God and says that. And he even says, Hargain, I'd rather die than have to see this with my wonderful people. That was a leadership who speaks, someone who actually was willing to give up himself for the people. And God says, okay, and he gave them 70 leaders to help Moshe. Then in Chatzerot, when his brother and sister complained about Moshe, right? And the Chet of the Meraglim, where Yoshua and Caleb come and speak when Aaron and Moshe fall to their face. Something is beginning to happen. We get 70 leaders. Now brother and sister are complaining. And now they can't handle the Meraglim, and they have two others who take who lead it, right? Moshe, Yoshua, and Kalev, and then so comes Korach, and again Moshe can't handle it. Moshe, no, they can't handle it. They fall on their faces again. Something is happening. The Mamre Va was perhaps the last straw, as God sees that the leadership of Moshe from year 1 is not the same as the leadership of Moshe in year 40. And that's why it means when it says Lema'an Nechem, when it says that Moshe said, and God punished me for your sake. For your sake, I was not the right leader. I was no longer behaving like a leader should.
Wait, who said that?
Moshe.
Himself said
Moshe says, God got angry at me, lema'anchem, which Rashi says, oh, because of you. But as I pointed out, it means for your sake, for your benefit. And if we understand that because Moshe is Moshe, and he saw, oh, I goofed. I recognize my sin. More than that, I've recognized that perhaps I'm not the same Moshe who I was, with the same patience that I had 40 years ago. I mean, who would blame him? I understand that. But he was able to recognize that and not blame somebody else. Oh, it was your fault. That's not what he was saying. For your benefit, it was better that I stepped down from the leadership role. That's what he's saying. Yes?
I think when we study the Torah, it should teach us how we're supposed to behave as individuals as well. We as parents, our parents up to a certain stage, the children marry, and we have to step back and say, now it's your turn. Moshe was Moshe for 40 years. They're going to a new place, it's a new life, they need a new leader.
Very nicely put. Very nicely put. And very nicely put about parenting. Every parent knows that it's a tough thing. I wouldn't have done that. Why are the kids doing that? You know, I didn't bring them up that way. Look what they're doing with their kids. You know, it happens. But then you put your tongue in between your teeth and say, "Sha." You know what?
It works.
I didn't raise my kids probably the way my parents did. There were different things. Everybody has to build themselves and be independent and go on. The biggest, the most common reason for divorce is the in-laws getting involved in the family. It's true. That's what it is. It's not money, it's in-laws.
There's another issue
And,
that Hashem didn't want to embarrass Moshe and say, you're not going to be good as a leader. So he said, you know what, I'll show you where they're going, and just go.
Later on, right, that's what he does there when he says you can't. Yeah, right. Yes.
So, I see it as a self-fulfilling prophecy at the snap. Moshe says, but I won't be able to do this. They're not going to listen to me. They're this, they're that. He had all these excuses why he didn't want to do it. And that he wasn't, there was something else I wanted to say, but I see it as a self-fulfilling.
Someone said, look, it was a
so
canteen.
So Moshe accepted it. And he said, can I just see?
That God said you wanted to see, so he let him see it. Correct. Yes. Yeah, he said, go up in the high area and look here. And he said, look and see it, because you're not going to cross the Jordan. You won't go in, but I'll let you see it. Correct. Yeah.
I'm wondering whether it really was a punishment, and whatever that word is in Hebrew, which my Hebrew is not very
Yeah.
it's a consequence. It's not really a
That very well put. It's a consequence. And maybe that's exactly what Moshe saw of it. We just think, a consequence is I did something wrong. Here, it's a consequence of a nation that is growing. It's not the nation that was in year 1. It's not the same generation. And the consequence of that is that you don't fit that anymore. Now, I want to show that to you, and I have a few minutes left to finish this up, when you look at the Torah, after these events, we find out the events that take place. The event, for example, we find out that the Canaanites attack. And it says, Vaishnarak Na'ani Melech Arad, and they say, oh yeah, they saw that the Ananei Kavod after Aaron died, and so on and so forth, and they attacked Israel, and took hostages, basically. And then it says, Vayidar Yisrael Neder. So Israel took an oath. Please God, if you help us, and we will, everything will be. We're not taking anything for us for any benefit. Bottom line was, they don't go running to Moshe. Moshe, they're attacking us. What should we do? They don't do that. It says, and Israel pointed to, turned to God and said, God, do this and this and that. Then didn't they take to Moshe? That's very after that. Suddenly Moshe isn't there. And then when the miracles happened, it says, Az Yashir, who? Az Yashir, we're used to saying Moshe, B'nai Yisrael. Not here. The second Az Yashir in the Torah, it says, Az Yashir Yisrael. There's no Moshe. And suddenly Moshe becomes a little less important. Because it's a time when God says, your leadership is getting down, not because you're not that important, but for Israel, you will not be, because you're not going to be.
They are taking responsibility.
And so exactly, like you were saying about children, now the children, meaning now the people themselves, are doing exactly what God wants them to do. That's exactly it. And the war, it says, for example, Yishlach Yisrael Malachim. They took. It was Israel who sent agents to Sichon and Og to see if it'll be he can get an agreement to walk through their land. It doesn't say Moshe there, and it says when the war occurred, Vayakehu Yisrael, and Israel defeated them. And then Vayikach Yisrael, and Israel took over the cities. And Vayeshev Yisrael, and Israel settled now in all of these cities here. It's Israel and Israel and Israel and Israel, and that's only after this sin. After the sin of the water, where he says, no more. You can't do it anymore. And that's why it's so important, this 20th chapter, is that these now leaders are no longer going to be the future leaders. And this is exactly why. Because it was time for them to realize Israel had depended completely on Moshe and Aaron. And the future is not going to be that. The future will not be the miracle, the miracle performers. The ones who stretch out a staff and this happens and all these miracles happen. You're going to go into the land. And you know what? You're going to have to take responsibility. You're going to have to plow. You're going to have to seed. You're going to have to do everything that are normal things. You're probably also going to have an army and fight in the army, even if you're sitting in this kollel. There'll be times you have to do this. The Mishnah says it clearly. Mishnah says that in times of when people are threatened, everybody goes into the army. So you have to go and do things yourself to be able to lead, not by yelling and screaming to somebody, help me, you do it. God says, I'm going to help you, but I'm going to help you. I'm not going to do it for you. So what we read in Moshe had told in the beginning of the year, Hashem yilachem lachem, va'atem tachlishun. God will fight for you. You just stay quiet. That's no longer going to be. That was the turning point. Right there, Parakuf, this whole difference changes history. That's where we are.